How important is it to stay dry? Is it basically impossible?
It's impossible to stay dry. You're wet all the time. You're wet all the time.
What does that mean? That means infections are more efficient?
Yeah. So yeah, I don't know if you saw the picture in my book where I have the
yellow spots?
yeah.
So, yeah, there's a picture with your entire face consumed with yellow spots. Is basically, I guess that's MRSA.
Yep.
Oh boy.
Yep.
So how did that happen? What was the infection like? And and how crazy are you for letting that infection stay in you for a prolonged period of time without treating it, or you had no choice?
No, I did have a choice. I was 19 years old and I was taking care of a giant anteater that was orphaned, and this is like my dream animal.
Yeah.
And she was mine, and my job was to teach her the jungle. And so when I started like noticing that I had an infection and that I think I had dengue at the time too, I went back to town, probably picked up MRSA in the hospital where I got tested, came back into the jungle, and then got progressively sicker and sicker and weaker and weaker as I was 2 weeks, 3 weeks in the jungle. And then it got to the point where my vision went black and white and I passed out one day. And I don't know why, but at the time I had shaved that day. And when I woke up the next morning, I couldn't open my eyes because the pus had come out of my eyes.
Yeah.
And out of the pores in my face, all those little micro cuts, and the pillow was stuck to my face. And I was stuck upriver with no help at 19 years old. And also when you see that picture, you can imagine that I assumed that my life was over because I didn't know what it was. And I also didn't assume that, or at the very least, I figured I'd be disfigured the rest of my life. I didn't think there was any getting better from that. And so I remember sitting by the side of the river praying that a boat would come by, but it was the rainy season and there aren't going to be any boats because the river is psychotic. And so it was a long time before I got back to town, and I didn't want to leave the anteater, but it became like, I realized I was dying. And then I finally got a boat with some loggers, a death boat just loaded with, these guys had gone into the jungle and shot everything they could and taken all the babies, and they were going to go sell them. And so it was like baby monkeys and toucans and birds in cages and pieces of crocodiles and anaconda skins and jaguar skins rolled up. And it was just like, I was just laying there with all these dead animals in the boat with all the flies on my face, and got back to the hotel, called my mother, said, please book me a flight out like today. And then I sat on the plane, and somebody sat next to me on the plane, and I had a hood on. And I do remember that in the haze, at this point I was having trouble staying conscious, but I do remember that she like looked over, like trying to see what was sitting next to her. And then she got up and never came back. And when I got to immigration in New York, you know, the cop, he like takes my passport and he goes, so what were you doing in Peru? He's looking down and he goes, yeah. And he like holds up the passport, looks at the passport, looks at my face. He goes, Bo, buddy. He goes, what the fuck? And I said, no, that's Waddy. I was like, I'm trying to get home to go to the hospital. And he goes, He stamps it. He goes, go. God bless. He's like, oh shit.
Yeah.
And then they put me in the room in the hospital with like the hazmat suits, and they didn't know what it was. And I spent like 5 days on IV antibiotics with like 4 different things running through my veins. And the doctors were like, don't let it go that close. They're like, you went real close on that one.
Yeah, that's what that picture, I mean, people should check out the book just to see the picture. Because I imagine you just laying there, unable to see, have a fever probably. Mm-hmm. So you're like half hallucinating.
Yep.
And there's no boat. There's no way out.
There's no help coming.
Plus there's this creature who you've become a parent of.
Yeah.
That you love.
Yeah.
Boy, that's a dark place to be as a 19-year-old. I mean, most people will never be in a place like that. Like, where did you find strength in that place?
I don't know. I just remember writing like a goodbye letter to my parents because I said, if I die out here, it was really dark. Like it was terrifying. It really felt like it was the end. And I was writing, you know, if you find me out here, I'm sorry, and all that type of stuff. And it was, you know, I don't know about strength. There was no strength. It was just like move forward. And at some point it was like, if you'll take me downriver, take me downriver, you know. And
you just got lucky with the loggers, with the death boat that they found you. Well, how did the infection start, by the way?
I don't know. I really don't know. I mean, we always have some sort of little shit, but the thing is now JJ taught me that there's like 3 different trees that can cure infections. I didn't know this at the time. I didn't know the cheat codes. Now there's if you have a small infection, you can use sangre de drago and it'll cure it right away. Like let's say you have a bot fly and it gets a little pussy. There's a fly living in your skin. You put that on there, not only will it kill the fly, but it'll heal the infection. Now, if you have a worse infection, you can go to Ohe, which is Ficus insipida, and you can use that. And that will completely heal. That will murder. It's like crocodile blood. It will murder infections. So like, forget Neosporin. That's a joke. Mm-hmm. These are heavy chemical compounds running through these trees, and they know all about them. And so whatever it is. So now at this point, that's no longer an issue, like, because we know how to handle it, which at that time, if JJ had been there, I would have been fine.
Well, learn the hard way. So these are open wounds, and then there's creatures that start living in them. Is basically what is it?
Well, that's separate. That's bot flies. Yeah, there's a creature that unfortunately, very, very, very unfortunately, likes to make its home inside the flesh of mammals.
Yeah.
And so the flies attach their eggs to mosquitoes. The mosquitoes go and seek out warm-blooded animals. The eggs, microscopic eggs, fall into your skin and then begin to grow. And sooner or later, you feel a twitch. And it's a worm living inside of you that's like vertical down in you, and it's eating you.
Yeah.
And at first, it's not a problem. But when they get to about as thick as that pen, it starts to hurt because you got a hole in you. And they have a little breathing tube that comes up, and they breathe, and they go back in, and then they eat, and they come back up to breathe. And you have a friend living in you.
Yeah.
And
you've had one of those?
I've had lots of those. It's tough to take them out. They have hooks.
How do you have to? Oh man, you gotta love the jungle. So how do you take it out?
You have to come.
Yeah, 100%.
You gotta put an irritant. So like a lot of times, what we'll do down there is someone will take a massive drag of a cigarette, mm-hmm. and then they'll spit they'll power like exhale and get some of the tar, which also shows you how much tar you get out of a cigarette. And then with a knife, and you put that right over the hole. Mm-hmm. And then you slap some Vaseline or something on top of that so they can't breathe. And eventually, over the course of a few hours, they'll come up enough looking for air. Mm-hmm. And then you got to grab them with a tweezer and try not to rip them because then you're going to get an infection. And you got to squeeze from the butt. It's a whole ceremony. When people have bot flies, we're all like, oh, it's bot fly time. Let's go. And then like JJ will squeeze. He's got like pliers for thumbs. Yeah. He can like take a piece of your neck and you think he's going to break your skin. He'll just squeeze until this thing comes out.
And you don't want to. I guess there's an open wound right there, and
you don't want to bathe for a day or two after until that closes, because otherwise you're gonna have like water sloshing around in like a little pocket of yours. It's kind of gross.
And that water might have other organisms in it.
Water in your skin tends to, yeah. I mean, the jungle water's clean. We drink it like I drink the water fresh out of the stream.
Oh, that's interesting.
Well, it's just a giant filtration system. All those roots, the whole jungle's constantly purifying everything.
People might be thinking about that with the jungle. Yeah, there's insects probably all over you all the time.
It's not as bad as you think. Like I've been to Finland, Lapland in the summer, and the mosquitoes are horrendous, like devastating. The Amazon in our area, if you're sitting in a hammock reading a book, out, our research stations don't have walls or anything. You're good for about one mosquito every half hour, which really is not a lot. It's worse in New Jersey. Like, it's really not that bad.
Tell me a little more about the little baby anteater, Lulu.
Lulu,
who you've rescued and had to sadly leave behind.
Yeah, I just was always fascinated with giant anteaters. Or this, German Shepherd-sized thing with Wolverine claws and these giant Popeye forearms, and they excavate ant and termite mounds, and they have this long tongue, and their babies ride on their back for the first 6 months of their lives, and so they actually have this incredibly intimate relationship with their young. And it just so happens that this animal that I was wildly fascinated with, there was an orphan on the river, and JJ was like, "You love these things," and I was like, "Yeah." And so he went and he was like, "Hey, my friend, you should." He got me the baby, and we were like, we're going to rewild her. And so I spent like weeks and weeks and weeks just like with this thing on my back, crawling through the jungle, teaching her to find ants, giving her milk, falling asleep with her on my chest. And their tongue is like 11 inches long at that age. And so when she wanted me to wake up, she'd fire it up my nose and it would come out my mouth. And and then if I tried to get her off me quick, she'd stick the claws in. And, all my clothes, I have old, now they're like museum pieces with rips in them from Lulu's claws.
Just able to also communicate emotion and feeling and all that.
She needed it. So if this animal didn't have the physical touch, If I didn't hold her all day long, she'd throw tantrums. She'd go shred something. She'd go pull down the curtain. She'd go ruin the wood. She'd start literally having a traumatic response to not having intimacy, which was shocking. Because again, on the scale of a cockroach to an elephant, you go, I didn't know that giant anteaters had such intense emotions. Like, but she did. And we, and also taking care of her forced me to explore the jungle from the perspective of an animal.
Yeah.
So I got to like be an animal. And so there's only a few times in my life where I've gotten to do that. One was with her. Another time was living with a herd of elephants where I had to walk with them through the forest and like see how they interacted completely natural. Mm-hmm. And it's different. It's very different. And you realize like, just like a person's public persona when they're out on the street in Manhattan is going to be very different than when you're on the couch with them on a Tuesday night. And with wild animals, it's very much like that. Like if you see a bobcat on a trail and it's going to look at you and glare at you and then go off. And it's like, yeah, but what's it like when it's in the den and it's playing with its cubs?
Yeah. So that when it's looking at you, that's like the Instagram post it's making. And the actual
it's doing duck face. Yeah.